We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
It is Halloween.
Yay!
The greatest time of the year.
It is. It's the most wonderful time of the year.
So, EJ, I want to know, and I'm sure our listeners want to know, if you could only watch one horror movie this year, what would that horror movie be? What is your like ideal Halloween movie?
You didn't prep me for this.
I didn't. So I went off the cuff now.
This is crazy.
Right now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would say that, can I pick two and say one for fun and one is spooky?
Totally,
one is actually scary?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, I haven't seen Hocus Pocus in a really long time.
Okay, yeah.
So I would love to see Hocus Pocus again.
Okay.
And the other one that's more serious, I would probably want to see Midsummer.
Okay.
Because I haven't seen it in a while.
It's so funny because Midsummer is like it is, but it's not.
I know.
I don't even really classify Midsummer as a supernatural movie.
It's not really a Halloween movie, is it?
It's a cult movie. It's not spoiler alert for our audience, but it's not the way Hereditary.
Yes, I know Hereditary was up there too.
Hereditary is that supernatural movie. It's such a good supernatural horror movie. Yeah.
It is, and I think that to me, really good scary horror is the exploration of the human psyche.
For sure.
So depression, loss, grief,
yeah,
all of that. That is good horror to me. And so Midsummer really hits that. And among many other movies, I mean, geez, the Color Out of Space hits that for me too.
Oh,
and
for sure.
I mean, there's a lot of good ones. Obviously, Hereditary. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I think that oh my God, The Witch, that would be a good one.
The Witch is a
would be
good creepy
Halloween
one.
Movie.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop.
See now you're running off.
Gonna...
I said off the cuff. It's got to be off the cuff. It's got to be right now.
There you go. That's it. What about you?
Okay, so I will give you two for the same thing.
Okay.
The one that's fun. Well, so I'll give you one that is fun and one that is extremely special to me that our listeners may or may not be familiar with. And then I'll give you my ideal sort of Halloween experience movie.
Okay.
Okay, so first off, when I was a kid, my aunt taped for me Disney's Halloween Treat, which was a program that Disney ran in the 1980s, and it was a series of their spookier short cartoons that they had done. So it was Mickey and Goofy and Donald chasing the ghosts, and the one where Pluto dies and goes to cat hell and stuff like that. Where there's the one where Donald's nephews trick or treat into his house, and he tricks them, and so the witch helps them trick him back. It was all this creepy stuff, and then it also had the Night on Bald Mountain section from Fantasia and all of that stuff. So that is, even now when Halloween rolls around, I have it, and I will rewatch parts of it and kind of just remember that. It takes me right back to that feeling of being a little kid with my candy, surrounded by all the decorations that I put up, and being okay, cool, let's get into the spirit.
Let's get spooky.
And then I really think that my quintessential horror movie is probably Amityville.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I like Amityville. It's Amityville very, very closely tied with Burnt Offerings.
Oh, I love Burnt Offerings.
Yeah.
That movie's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's just something that Amityville, it's so classic, I think, that you can't get away from it, man. It's one of the most influential horror movies of all time. Mm-hmm. And it's haunted houses are a very... I love them, and they're a very close thing to me as a quintessential horror trope. I love the idea of haunted houses more than almost any other type of horror. And so that is my my jam right there.
You love haunted house.
I really
stuff.
do. That's my favorite,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I like the haunted mind. I like the messed up.
Yeah. Well, you get a little bit of that in Burnt Offerings.
You do, yeah. You really do get that with Skinamarink.
Oh, Skinamarink was fantastic.
It's not necessary. It is a haunted house. It actually is.
It's a haunted
I think.
house.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that house is very clearly haunted. Whether it is or not, or, there's a whole debate. But yes, Skinamarink is absolutely about a child's experience inside what they think is a haunted house.
Yes.
Because all houses are scary at night when you're children. That's the point of the entire movie. That's why it's so good.
It's so good. Did you say that there was a third?
A third horror movie? For me?
Yeah, you said... Oh, maybe you just put them together. I thought you were going to pick a third.
If I had to pick a third, it would not be a haunted house movie. It would be The Ritual.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah.
Yes. We just saw that recently.
Yeah, I think probably last Halloween. I rewatched that.
We rewatched it, and
because
it was just as good.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing that I really love is that cosmic, the Ritual tiptoes into that cosmic horror. It's unknowable. It's just cataclysmically, not even evil. Like, I don't think The Ritual is about evil creatures. It's about primal creatures.
Nature.
Yeah.
It's nature horror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's Midsommar too.
That is, and that's The Color Out of Space. Very, very cosmic.
Right. Yes, very cosmic.
Bigger than you can control.
Yeah.
It's just...
Bigger than you can know. It's very
bigger
Lovecraft.
than you can know.
Yeah.
Which, yes.
Yeah, to know it is to go insane.
Right. Well, by the way, we're slaying monsters.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of insanity, we got Matt across the table.
How's it going?
And I'm EJ.
Oh,
and
yeah.
what is this? This is a very different sort of episode because...
This is a special episode.
Yeah.
This is our Halloween special.
It's our Halloween special where we're going to dive into our Estes Method.
Yes.
A little bit. What the
Exactly.
Estes Method is, and then we're going to do a little bit of a debrief on the experience
Yes.
of the method and of us doing it, which is hopefully going to be really enlightening.
Yeah, I mean, we've been building up to this for quite a while, and it's something that I've wanted to do for a while is have the opportunity to actually do a ghost investigation ourselves. And, we've talked about this. It's not so much an investigation in terms of, like, are there ghosts in this place? It is an investigation into the methods of ghost hunting.
Yes.
Which is what we did. We sat down with this very new, very kind of quote unquote cutting edge method of spiritual communication, and we put it through its paces to try to see if there's any worth in it and if it holds up to scientific rigor. Because I don't believe, I've done a little research, a little looking, I don't believe that anyone has tried to do this with the Estes Method yet. People have done this with spirit boxes. People have done this with electronic voice phenomena, the recorders that they get from that. I haven't come across anyone who's actually tried to scientifically, with control, investigate the efficacy of the Estes Method as a type of spiritual communication. And, I mean, we are not going to be investigating whether this communicates with ghosts. We are going to be investigating the history of this and whether it seems like it is even a reasonable road to travel down if you want to use it for spiritual communication.
Right.
Right? So the point here is not going to be to prove or disprove the existence of ghosts. I'm not sure we can do that in the time that this podcast allows us.
It's too big a lift, guys. Sorry.
But like anything else, I believe that if we all kind of start at the same place and with the same facts and the same we follow the same logical processes, we should arrive at the same conclusion. So basically, if we all say, okay, these are the tools that we can practically use to solve the mystery of whether ghosts are real or not, and then we all follow the same scientific, logical processes, we should all reach the same conclusion. Which right now, I'm not sure is what's going on in the spiritualism world. There's a lot of people who are kind of all over the place saying like, oh, this works, this doesn't work. There are plenty of ghost hunting groups right now that are using the Estes Method and saying, I think this is a great way to communicate with spirits. And I think we have to check and see if it is.
So let's get into that then.
So yeah, let's get into that. The Estes Method, just as a quick overview for any of our listeners who might not be familiar with it, the Estes Method is a form of ITC, or what they call instrumental transcommunication, which is really just a fancy way of saying talking to the dead, right? It is essentially what the Fox sisters and other spiritual mediums were doing in the 1800s, just with electronics instead of knuckle cracking or table turning. And if you want a great deep dive into the history of spiritual communication from a medium perspective, go all the way back to the beginning of this podcast and check out our early series on the Fox sisters. We did 4 episodes on their rise to prominence and the way that they essentially pulled the wool over a lot of people's eyes in the mid 1800s and became very successful mediums.
That's one of my favorite series because...
Oh, thank you.
No, I've really enjoyed being on the journey with it because the sisters are such awesome, intelligent, like they're really like savvy, business savvy, and they just know how to play that game, and they made a lot of money doing it, and I have a lot of, I don't know, I respect them a lot.
Yeah.
Just the same with Sarah Winchester, the same person, like same idea. Just,
Sarah Winchester's the shit.
Yeah. Women that had everything going against them in some ways, like just because the time was just so hard, and Sarah Winchester had money, so that helped. But but anyway.
Yeah. So the idea behind the Estes Method is we're trying to communicate with ghosts. Right? We're trying to talk to ghosts or spirits or sometimes demons, we lump all of this under the same umbrella. And what you do for this method is you take a device that's called a Spiritbox. And the Spiritbox is a pretty common device used in ghost hunting these days. It is essentially a radio, and it flips through radio frequencies at a very high rate of speed. And the idea being that ghosts are going to use this to communicate with us by grabbing little bits of radio broadcasts or interference or noise or something and stringing them together to form words and sentences. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing about the Spiritbox is that when you just run it as it is, it emits a sound, and then sometimes you'll get a voice from it. And generally, when you have a ghost hunting group, you might have 4 or 5 people listening and all trying to interpret it the same way. What happened is there were a couple of investigators who said, well, can we elevate this somewhere else? Can we try to cut out some of the bias that people might be bringing from several sets of ears listening? And so what they did is they connected the Spiritbox to a set of noise-canceling headphones and added an eye mask to it. It was initially the person just closing their eyes, but now they wear an eye mask. And essentially you create like a sensory deprivation experience where only one person, the only sense that they are getting from audio or visual is just the sounds of the Spiritbox. And they are trying to interpret what comes through. Mm-hmm. And then you have another investigator sometimes who would be asking questions and kind of guiding in a mediumship kind of way. And some people have gotten really, really compelling results from it, at least according to them. So in order to examine this method and instrumental transcommunication in general, let's dive into some of the history of communicating with the dead. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
At least from an electronic standpoint, right?
At least from an electronic standpoint.
It's the beginning of that.
Yeah, so we talked about mediums before. We talked about, having seances and everything that was going on like that. And that's getting back again to the Fox sisters. This is kind of the Victorian era. There's definitely an obsession with death going on. There's a lot of death. There's a lot of disease that's happening at this time, right? It should come as no surprise that as recording devices like radio and photography became more prominent, the desire to capture this spiritual communication for evidence grew. So these people are attending these seances, they're having these experiences and saying, oh, wow, it's great to tell this story, but wouldn't it be great if I could show a picture, or if I could have the voice of my grandfather, or Ulysses S. Grant or whoever they were getting during their seance. Like, wouldn't it be great if I had a recording of that? We could have evidence that there is life after death. The first audio recording device, not used for ghosts, just in general, the first audio recording device was created in, you want to take a guess, EJ?
In what year?
In what year?
1889.
1857.
Whoa, okay.
1857 by the French inventor Edward Leon Scott de Martinville. Did I do okay? Martinville.
You did great. You did great. You get a B-.
So his device was kind of like this reverse megaphone. It's got a really wide-mouthed tube that captured the vibrations of sound waves and transferred them to a stylus. So think about, a megaphone, right? Mm-hmm. Except you're talking into the wide end of the megaphone. Mm. And then at the end, there's a stylus, like a pointy stylus, that is scratching a visual representation of the vibrations of your sound waves onto a material.
But it's not exactly like translating what you're saying or anything like that. That'd be way too advanced.
No.
Scratches.
The stylus inscribed these vibrations visually on a reel of paper.
It's like a lie detector test.
Yeah, kind of, sort of, yeah. Mm. All that was the first visual representation of a sound wave.
Cool.
For the first time, we saw that there was
energy.
A type of energy coming out of a speaker. It could be recorded. Mm-hmm. They had no way to play these fat beats back, and so the device was just kind of a proof of concept. And then Thomas Edison designed a very similar invention in 1870, and apparently he was completely unaware of de Martinville's contribution to the medium. He didn't seem to know about that device at all. Now, for Edison's device, rather than writing on paper, the stylus he used created grooves on a metal cylinder, kind of like a can. Mm-hmm. And when a needle was passed along these now embossed grooves, the recorded spectrum could be played back and amplified through a tube, and that resulted in the first recorded audio in history. So Edison was the guy who said, we don't just have to write it on paper, we could actually scribe it on something that would create a groove, and then that groove could be played back.
Crazy.
That invention was modified by Alexander Graham Bell, who changed the recording cylinders. He made them flat and added a wax-coated cardboard to them. By 1886, the Volta Gramophone Company was founded, and the world saw its first...
Record player,
exactly. By the 1920s, these became household staples, and, still hold their own against the rising radio and television till really like the 70s and 80s, mm-hmm. when magnetic tapes finally take over.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, the sound out of a record player is just amazing. I don't know. I'm one of those people that really loves that sound, especially like the pops and the crackles when things aren't completely correct and right. I love that. One of my favorite memories is like going to my great aunt's house after she passed away, and then I went to her house and we were looking at her stuff and we played one of her old records. I just put on one of her old records. I think it was it's just some orchestral music. And it was the first time I ever really listened to a record player. I think because she had gone and I was like, oh, I want to see what kind of stuff she listened to. And it was really like life-changing and like kind of moving. And I was like, wow, this is as close to the real sound I feel than you can get.
It gives it more of a body.
It does.
In a way, it gives it more texture.
It does.
Right?
It gives it a lot of texture.
It's funny because, I do film, and so much of the digital revolution, as wonderful as it has been from a quality perspective and all of that, there's a lot of filmmakers out there, myself included sometimes, who are still trying to get back to the texture of actual physical film, where there's a lot of times where you add grain and you add, little scratch marks or something from time to time, where you're like, I want to get back to the texture that we once had, because when when something becomes so sanitized and so perfect,
Yes.
we like it less. It feels worse to us.
There's an uncanny valley going on
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah.
So interestingly, Thomas Edison was probably the first person to speculate that his invention could actually be used to capture spirit voices. In the 1920s, he said, "If our personality survives, then it is strictly logical or scientific to assume that it retains memory, intellect, other faculties, and knowledge that we acquire on this earth. Therefore, if we can evolve an instrument so delicate as to be affected by our personality as it survives in the next life, such an instrument, when made available, ought to record something."
I mean, it makes sense.
The logic is there, right?
Why not?
This is sort of you hear a lot when people talk about spiritualism and is there life after death and all this stuff. You hear a lot about the matter cannot be created or destroyed. That transfer of energy thing. That, if there is some type of physical consciousness, like if our consciousness, our personality exists in some form, it has to go somewhere. It doesn't just dissipate.
Yeah, that's my biggest thing.
And that was Edison's perspective too. Now, if Edison ever had plans to create a telephone to the dead, as he called it, he died before he was able to realize any of them. But this instrumental transcommunication work was carried on by Attila von Sassle, or Art, as he liked to be called. A self-proclaimed, quote, gifted psychic and yogic practitioner, von Sassle dabbled in the rising esotericism movement of post-World War II.
I just don't agree with him.
What part?
if your name is Attila, why would you have people call you Art? I would make people call me Attila, and I would walk around with a giant pole axe.
Is that not such a 1950s, Art? No, my name is Art.
So 1950s.
There's just something about the fact that you have this exotic name, but you downplay it and you normalize it to such a degree.
I mean, you have the coolest name you could possibly be given.
I know,
Attila,
man.
And then you make it Art. I can just see the high-waisted slacks that he wears and the loafers and everything instead of the pole axe. It makes me sad. Truly.
He looks exactly like a character from Bewitched.
Really?
Yeah, he totally does.
Oh man, the 50s were not kind to people named Attila.
Much like the Fox sisters' rise to prominence after the Civil War, the Western world has started to take on this new fascination with the occult and spiritualism in the mid-century. It's no surprise that death, chaos, and war, they have a tendency to focus people on the afterlife as they search to find meaning in the tragedy that surrounds them. So, post-World War II, we're kind of in the same place that we were post-Civil War. It's after the Civil War that we really see mediumship, spiritualism explode in this country. Same deal in World War II. Now, starting in either 1936 or 1941, depending on your source, von Sassle attempted to capture ghost voices on a 78 RPM record. This was unsuccessful, but he refused to be deterred by something as minor as failure.
Good for him.
Yeah, he swore that it was going to work. And as magnetic tape took over and started to replace these disc recordings in the 1950s, this is now super cutting edge technology, right? Von Sassle eagerly joined that movement. Still actively researching the paranormal, he connected with a California landscape painter named Raymond Bayless. Bayless was a self-taught artist who found a good deal of success through his painting. And today his paintings actually hang in the National Air and Space Museum and the Pentagon, as well as other government buildings and galleries.
Cool.
Yeah. Bayless was interested in the paranormal, although he considered himself critical of most reports. These days, we would have him as the token skeptic in the group. The one who half-heartedly tries to explain away this phenomenon, but is more often than not left like dumbfounded and is like, oh, I can't explain what I saw. You know, I don't think it was a ghost, but I don't know what it was.
That's what they're always there for. That they're always just these like foils that aren't really foils for these shows. Like you have like Renee from looking for Bigfoot or whatever. Finding Bigfoot. Who's like a scientist who's like kind of like.
I'm not sure. I don't know that Renee was actually a scientist.
I'll just say this. Scientific.
Yeah, she was
air
scientific.
Quotes, scientific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. But her whole point was just to be like, I don't think it was a Bigfoot, but I don't know what it was.
Or just to say, I don't know.
Right. In later years, Bayliss became more and more critical of empirical evidence, which he believed was too easy to fake. So even as it went on more and more, got to the point where he was saying like, well, I don't believe that you took a picture of a ghost because it's too easy to fake pictures. And then that's like circular logic. Mm-hmm. You know, what evidence do you need? I don't know. He was reliant now on personal experiences as he got later in life. But personal experiences are the easiest thing to lie about.
Oh, very much so.
So anyway, working together, von Sasley and Bayliss built a custom recording device. And this was a microphone that was placed inside a megaphone and connected to a tape recorder and a speaker. And their theory was pretty similar to Edison's. If there are spiritual voices creating sound waves in the environment around you, the megaphone should amplify them and the microphone should pick them up. When von Sasley and Bayliss played their tape back, they were shocked to hear phantom voices in places where they had expected silence. Among the messages they could decipher were the cryptic phrases, "This is G," "Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you all," and "Hot dog, Art."
Using that 50s slang.
And this is one of the other funny things about EVPs, is that more often than not, whenever you see somebody doing EVPs, the ghost never speaks with the cadence and the slang that you would expect from someone who died at the time that they would have died. Mm-hmm. If we're going to a Civil War battlefield and you're trying to record EVP voices, they don't use slang and phrases from the 1860s for some reason.
No, they'd say, whoa, those shoes slay. Those shoes you're wearing are, man, they kill me. They slay.
Do people say that?
People say, I think they do. I don't know. I'm old. Is that still cool?
Like nice fit.
Yeah, like nice fit. That's what the Civil War soldier would come back from the dead and like look at your outfit and be like, nice fit.
Nice fit.
Yeah, nice fit. Yeah, that might be lame right now too. I don't know. That might not be cool anymore.
I don't know. I can't. I
don't know what the kids are doing. This is the thing. Ghosts have time to listen to slang. What else are they doing?
Do you think maybe the ghosts keep up on the slang so they can kind of fit in with the younger generation?
Yeah, they want to fit in with the group. They want to be included. They just have time. They can watch TV. They can listen to the radio. Because they're on those frequencies.
I mean, that is what I would do.
Yeah.
There is so much TV that I'm not able to get to because I'm too busy. If I had all the time because I was dead, I would just watch TV.
Yeah, I mean, what else are you going to do?
Von Sasley and Bayliss, they had recorded the very first instances of electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. More specifically, they'd been the first people to misinterpret noise floor as spiritual phenomena. Now, noise floor is the phrase that audio engineers use to refer to all the latent noise that's present in a recording. This can include ground loops, interference, electromagnetic noise, and the passive noise floor from your own equipment. Noise floor is present in all recordings, although sometimes it's so quiet that it's almost inaudible. But when you raise your recording levels or your listening levels, your volume, your playback volume, you can still hear it. If you crank up the volume on this podcast right now, you'll hear our noise floor. But why did von Sasley and Bayliss interpret this fairly consistent string of sounds as spiritual voices? This brings us to the problem of apophenia and the research of Diana Deutsch. You may remember her from our Schloss Furnace series. She is a psychologist who developed an experiment and used repeated patterns of tones played on loops. Listening to these creates the impression of phantom words, which manifests thanks to the human's brain pattern-seeking behavior. That's what we call apophenia. We're always kind of searching for patterns because, let's be honest, when we were looking for predators and looking for beneficial herbs and things like that, we needed that in order to survive.
Yeah, it kept us alive.
Right. Deutsch attributes the source of these phantom words to the subject's psychological mindset and calls the experiment similar to a Rorschach test. She reported that running the experiment before a college exam yielded phantom words like, I'm tired, no brain, and no time. When she played it for people on diets, words manifested as, I'm hungry, Diet Coke, and feel fat. And if you want to hear this for yourself, we'll drop a little phantom words loop in here. Remember, we talked about how misheard song lyrics are a more simplistic version of this phenomena. Think about NSYNC's It's Gonna Be May instead of It's Gonna Be Me. ABBA feeling the beat on a tangerine instead of a tambourine. Or Jimi Hendrix singing Excuse Me While I Kiss This Guy.
I'm just going to believe that that's the lyric, though. I love that.
It is pretty great.
Yeah.
So this is what happened to von Zasley and Bayliss, essentially, right? While listening for ghost sounds, so being in that particular mindset, we are looking for ghost voices, they increased the volume of the noise floor on their recordings because they had this big megaphone that was amplifying the noise. They amplified this latent noise, recorded it on the mic, and that became what Deutsch created in her research. Just meaningless pattern of sound, which made it the perfect fodder to interpret phantom words. Especially when you remember that these guys believed that they had isolated their microphone against ambient sounds. They hadn't, but they believed it.
Right.
So to them, nothing could have possibly made these sounds, which means there was only one explanation for these sounds: ghosts. Although, just to reiterate, those ghost voices were actually psychological phantom words created by apophenia thanks to the subjects listening to the noise floor at high volumes with preconceived mindsets. Von Zasley and Bayliss published their findings in the Journal of the American Society of Psychical Research in 1959. Now, that society had been founded as a scientific institution, but had fallen more and more on the side of pseudoscience and unfounded claims as time went on. Which is really a shame because one of the original members, Richard Hodgson, was an outspoken detractor of psychic mediumship, seances, and Helena Blavatsky.
My, how things have changed.
Really, yeah. But it just kind of went downhill. The more they investigated, the more they kind of got taken in by all of it. And it became harder and harder for them to maintain their scientific skepticism.
I think when it comes to this stuff, I think it's wishful thinking.
I think so too. Especially, there's something about communicating with the dead, because we all have lost someone that we wish we had more time with. And I think that the idea that there is a way for us to communicate with them, or that they can live on in a way that is pleasant, or they're not gone. Gone is so empty.
It's so final.
Yeah. Bayliss himself went on to publish a slew of books throughout his later life, including the 1979 Phone Calls from the Dead, which is still regarded as one of the definitive books on electronic voice phenomena. Now, while all this was happening, another painter was also investigating spirit voices. This one in Sweden. I don't know why it's painters, but painters are just like into this shit. Frederick Jurgensen was a still life and landscape painter by necessity. During his early life, he pursued a career as an opera singer before catching a very nasty cold which damaged his vocal cords. He wasn't able to sing professionally any longer because they were so damaged, and so he turned his focus to his second love, painting. Jurgensen was painting a landscape at his country home in Stockholm in 1959 when something remarkable happened. He'd been using a tape recorder to capture local bird sounds, kind of like the most primitive Merlin bird ID.
Yeah, right.
But when he played the recording back, he heard a voice he recognized. And he said, "When I listened through the tape, a voice was heard to say, 'Friedel, can you hear me? It's Mammy.' It was my dead mother's voice. Friedel was her special name for me."
That's really interesting.
And this is what we're talking about again. Mm-hmm. Like, this is someone who he had a relationship with that he wasn't ready to let go.
Mm-hmm. But he wasn't looking for it.
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
But what's interesting to me is that he wasn't already in an investigation for ghosts. He wasn't looking for ghosts.
No, he was recording birds.
Naturally
happened. He was just recording birds. Mm-hmm.
As far as we know. Mm-hmm.
That recording launched a lifelong obsession with capturing ghost voices. He abandoned painting for a while and focused solely on using his tape recorder as a seance machine. By the time he died in 1987, he'd amassed hundreds of hours of recordings across more than 1,000 sessions. He found the greatest success while recording at 1485 kilohertz, a frequency now called the Jurgensen frequency by ghost hunters.
Which we should do something for.
I think we should at some point, yeah. It's interesting because that frequency is also like bam right in the middle of the human vocal range. Mm. I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, but human voices tend to be between 1,000 and 2,000 kilohertz. They bounce around there. Okay. So depending on, are you a deeper voice, a higher voice? And then, of course, there's a lot of color to the way that we all talk. Mm. But that's like, boom, right about in the middle. So if you're trying to enhance the voices from a recording, that's usually about where you hit. You would crank up that frequency. So it makes sense that was where he found the most success, because that is where you would expect to find most voices. Mm-hmm. In the mid-1960s, Latvian writer Konstantin Raudive came across Jurgensen's book, Voices from Space. Raudive was living in Sweden at the time, having been exiled from Latvia during the Soviet reoccupation in 1944. A student of Carl Jung and contemporary of the famous parapsychologist Hans Bender, Raudive quickly became obsessed with ITC. And he launched into conducting his own sessions with a very rapid success. By 1969, Raudive had amassed over 70,000 separate recordings with voice messages from everyone from Hitler to Stalin to Mussolini to like just a man off the street. All these ghosts he's capturing, all these things. What's crazy is that some of these voices sounded nothing like their living versions, such as Raudive's recording of Winston Churchill, who sounded nothing like Winston Churchill, who has a very distinctive speaking voice. From Winston Churchill.
Did he sound like Mickey Mouse or something?
I don't know. I mean, basically, yeah.
I'm Winston Churchill.
When more skeptically minded people asked Raudive about this, he admitted that sometimes the spirits would lie to him, or sometimes he accidentally got impersonators.
He'd get like real comedians, huh?
Yeah. So he was getting like lookalikes or voice-alikes coming through, pretending to be Winston Churchill or pretending to be Hitler.
See, that's what a comedian would do. I bet he got a bunch of comedians, actually.
You're screwing it up for everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, Bob Hope. What are you doing?
That's so Bob Hope.
Yeah, Jerry Lewis over here.
Yeah, Abbott and Costello.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Despite all this clear nonsense, Raudive published a book titled, in English, Breakthrough, an amazing experiment in electronic communication with the dead. This book was accompanied by a flexi-disc vinyl that included over 20 minutes of his recordings. In this book, Raudive referred to his method of communicating as a electronic voice phenomena, the first time that phrase and EVPs had ever been used. It's not hyperbole to say that this changed the entire game. Up until this point, you had spiritual photography. Sure, like that's been going on the whole time. But you never really had evidence of spiritual communication. They're not really communicating you when they're in a photograph. You're just kind of there. You take the brown lady on the steps or something like that. It's just like, oh, there's a ghost, but she's not interacting with you, right? So it's not just documentation. This EVP phenomena meant that ghosts were intelligent beings and they wanted to communicate. Or so parapsychologists believed. But everything really accelerated in the 1970s thanks to a man named George Meek. Now, Meek was a wealthy businessman who had made his fortune designing and patenting air conditioning parts. It was an emerging business at the time. He ended up being very wealthy. And when he retired in the 60s, Meek attended a seance that changed his entire life. While there, he claimed that a spirit contacted him and enlisted his help to build a device that would enable communication with the dead. So he went to this seance, not really intending to do any of this. He just showed up. While he's there, one of the voices that comes through is the spirit who's like, hey, Meek, you want to fucking build a telephone for me? Meek was like, shit, I'm retired. I'm kind of bored. Why not?
Yeah, the ghost like, I'm a big fan of your work. I saw your work on Sheila's house down the street with her AC unit, man. She is
nice
just
and cool.
chilly. Chilly like me, man. I love it. I'm a huge fan. Anyway, by the way, let's build a telephone together.
So, working with this spirit, he designed and built the Spiritcom, a primitive ITC device, and it completely failed to contact any spirits at all. But much like our old friend Attila von Sasley, or Art, Meek wasn't so easily defeated just by failing. And in 1975, he contacted William O'Neill, who is an electronics engineer and medium. You gotta diversify. That's the thing. Like, you can't just... We're in the 70s now. Mm-hmm. You can't just have one thing that you are anymore.
No, not at all.
So, O'Neill, he had established two-way radio communication with a spirit that he called Doc Nick. Obviously, this really excited Meek, and together they started modifying O'Neill's device with the Spiritcom technology that Meek had developed. This time, they were working under the influence of a different spirit, Dr. George Jeffries Muller, a medical doctor who died 8 years earlier. This was someone who O'Neill had contacted, this Muller character.
Man, I wish I had a slew of imaginary friends.
Well, and so this is very similar to the Unsolved Mysteries that just came out.
It is very much like that.
Becky. Yeah, Becky. Becky was the name of the spirit. It was my spiritual...
My paranormal
partner. My paranormal partner was the name of the episode. Yeah. And it's this guy who is a medium who's working with this spirit called Becky, who's apparently advising him. It's exactly the same as what Meek and O'Neill are doing here. Muller told them to use 13 different tones from 131 hertz to 701 hertz, and then mix them all together and broadcast that sound over a speaker. And said that spirits will be able to use this sound to speak aloud, or at least speak aloud in the midst of this sound. George Meek sunk $500,000 into this project. O'Neill invested considerably less. After a house fire destroyed most of his possessions and left him living in a burned out shell, O'Neill didn't have much money, and he needed a way to make more money. So it's no surprise that the Spiritbox suddenly started working really, really, really well. Like, O'Neill was having conversations with Muller, who was responding in full intelligent sentences. I've seen videos of this where he's like, Muller, are you there? And Muller's like, yes, I am here. I am with you.
Wow. Like
communication that clear and that intelligent. Not the kind of one-off words and phrases that you see ghost hunters getting now. It is back and forth communication. So obviously, this is crazy success. This is success that no one has had before. Because up until this point, we're getting like little snippets of words. But Mueller, this spirit, is having full on, like, let's sit down and have tea type conversations with not Meek. He won't really talk to Meek, but he will talk to O'Neill. So proud of this device and positive that it is successful, Meek held a symposium showcasing their findings in 1982. And he showed several videos of the communication that they did. Unfortunately, after that, the device just kind of stopped working, and Mueller's spirit disappeared. Which just so happens to coincide with a whole bunch of believers and skeptics who were at that symposium suddenly wanting to get their hands on the device and test it for themselves. And if that seems shady, that it just stopped working when other people found out about it and wanted to test it, it's because it is fucking shady. See, it didn't take very long for sharp-eared listeners to identify the modulation put on the spirit voice, Mueller's voice, as an electrolarynx. You ever heard of this? An electrolarynx?
Oh, it's a voice box that is used for people that can't speak otherwise.
Yes,
right?
yeah, like I think most of our listeners will have heard them. They're the thing that people use to communicate after they've had their larynx removed. If you had throat cancer or something like that, I talk like this, right? That's why Mueller's ghost sounded like it was smoking 2 packs a day. It's also incredibly worth pointing out that O'Neill, who needed money desperately, was a ventriloquist and had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. This explains not only how he was able to produce the ghost voices, but also why, at least to some extent, he was producing the ghost voices. I believe that O'Neill believed he was actually communicating with spirits, at least initially.
You don't think he was a total hoaxer?
I don't think so.
He was the one doing the voices. Yeah.
Right. Either way, the device, the money, had run its course at this point. O'Neill died in 1992, a decade later, without any new developments made on the SpiritCom. Found amongst the effects in his workshop was an electrolarynx, the final proverbial nail in the coffin of the bogus device. But the idea of ITC, instrumental transcommunication, was forever cemented in the public's mind thanks to their developments. That 13-tone communication caught on, with paranormal investigators trying to find noise in that data. And think about it, you have 13 tones broadcast all mixed together. What is that? That's exactly what Diana Deutsch has been doing.
Yeah.
You're just, not only are you using noise floor, you're producing a noisier noise floor.
You're going to find anything you want in there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's the equivalent of looking at a blank sheet of paper and trying to find a face on it, or looking at a cloud and trying to find a face on it, or looking at, a sandy beach and trying to find a face there. You're going to be able to find something recognizable when you create a bunch of noise.
Or a rock face, looking out and seeing a thing climbing along the top of it.
Oh yeah, like the Fortean that we did.
Yeah.
This prompted paranormal investigator Frank Sumption to build his own ITC device in 2002. Unintentionally combining the SpiritCom and Deutsch's experiments, Sumption came up with the idea of a device which swept across radio frequencies instead of using the 13 tones. These microscopic snippets of broadcast could be interpreted as words or phrases, and Sumption claimed that he got intelligent spiritual communication from his device, which became known as Frank's box. He even used it at the Stanley Hotel, the backdrop for Stephen King's The Shining, where he famously recorded the communication, "My father did this." So creepy, right?
That's so creepy.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Which makes it so appropriate that the latest form of ITC device comes from that exact place, too. Named for the place where it was first implemented, Estes Park, Colorado, the Estes Method was first used at the Stanley Hotel. Developed by Connor Randall, Carl Pfeiffer, and Michelle Tate, this was a new twist on the traditional Spiritbox, or Ghost Box, or Frank's Box method of ITC, which effectively turned one person into a spiritual receiver. This group, ran a spirit box into a set of headphones and had Randall, the receiver, close his eyes, effectively shutting off all visual interference. The idea being that this was going to remove him from any kind of outside bias. Remember, we were talking about how, like, if you have this device and it's in the middle of 4 or 5 people and somebody points at it and it's like, was that a voice? Maybe it wasn't, but now everybody starts thinking, oh, maybe it was.
Yeah.
It streamlines it. But I don't think that that changes the basic conditions of ITC communication, which have been present since its inception in the 1930s. From my viewpoint, the story always gets built after the fact. Spirits don't intelligently communicate with you. You respond to apophenia sounds in noisy data and recontextualize them as spirit voices. Then you build a narrative around these voices and have a one-way conversation. As Claire Elliott of Manchester Metropolitan University's psychology department says, once words are heard, it's human nature to connect them in order to find patterns. With EVP, the tendency to infer agency to random patterns or occurrences and human-like characteristics to non-human objects could lead to assigning unwarranted significance to what is heard. Essentially, once you hear one voice in the dark, whether it's real or not, you're primed to hear more. You're searching for them, right? And maybe that's the nature of the whole thing. Once we learned that we could capture sounds and put them on discs or tapes or digital, it predisposed us to listen even more intently for things we didn't realize we captured. If we get the voices, what else did we get? Maybe pushing that big red record button is also priming us, changing our own viewpoint to start looking for things in the dark. But, as we here at Slaying Monsters see it, there's only one way to find out. We weren't content just to do armchair research into the ITC and the Estes Method. EJ and I conducted what I believe is the first scientific experiment into the Estes Method. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. And it's getting me thinking about the Psychical Institute. I don't remember the full name of it, but the way that it began skeptic and then turned more into believing in the paranormal, it makes me think that is the same psychological path that they went down. You hear one thing, they're primed, you're gonna continue to search for it. I think it's like it is that like that snowball effect of a pattern. Like you see it and you want to keep seeing it.
And this is sort of what happened to Jurgensen, I think. Did he hear his mother's voice? Probably not, right? Like, probably not. But he heard that one voice. He wasn't looking for it. But after that, he absolutely was. And so every voice that came after that could have been a ghost because he recorded one ghost voice, at least according to him. And that's what happens. You sit down and are looking for something, and you will find it. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to start talking about the experiment a little bit.
So yeah, let's talk about this. Okay. And we can preface this by saying, if you want to check it out, see our experiment yourself, you can head over to our website, slayingmonsterspodcast.com, click on the Support Us link at the top of the page, and that'll take you to our Buy Me a Coffee site where you can subscribe and get access to all of the sessions.
So if you want to pause now, go watch it, come back.
Check that out, yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, we'll also have little snippets of this as we go along, too.
Okay, great.
So my intention was to approach it in 3 different ways. The traditional way that it's approached, then do a blind test and a double blind test. So the traditional way is 2 people sit down in a room. One person is connected to the headphones, the spirit box, all of that, and is speaking the words aloud as they hear them. The other person is responding to that and kind of building a narrative off of it as they go. So if the person says cold, you would say, are you feeling cold? And then the person says happy. You say, what makes you happy? Are you happy now? Are you happy that we're here? And that you kind of build that narrative. That's the more traditional way of doing the Estes method. But I wanted to take it further than that. So we also did a session where we were both in the same room and I read pre-written questions that you had not seen, EJ. You had never seen these questions.
Nope.
And then as a double blind, to make sure that I wasn't being influenced by EJ, we did a session where we were separate. So EJ, you were in a different room than I was. You were in the basement. I was on the first floor reading those questions aloud. Mm-hmm. So let's start with session A. This is the double blind one where we were separated from each other. Mm-hmm. What was it like going through that, EJ?
The first time, it took me a really long time to get into it. Mm-hmm. I heard a lot of like music and gobbledygook and like nothing. Like I heard like, and it was really hard for me to hone in on words. So it took me a bit, but I got into it. Eventually I kind of trained my ear to really grab those snippets and repeat them as best as I could. I think I definitely missed some stuff, like especially in the first 30 seconds. I think I probably missed things as I was getting accustomed to it. A lot was very muddled still. Yeah, I mean, basically that's kind of the vibe right there.
Sure.
I did hear a snapping sound, I remember, in session A.
Yes. Yeah, we have that in the video.
Which is interesting because I had noise canceling headphones on, but I still heard a snap in the room.
Yeah.
But you could hear it.
Yeah, let's play that.
Okay.
Something snapped over here.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to hear when you do play it back, but I definitely heard it.
It is. You can hear the very faintest thing. Mm-hmm. It sounds a little bit like something electrical, which troubles me a little bit because you were in our basement. But there is something there. It's interesting that, and you did have noise canceling headphones. They were Sony WH-1000. So they are actual, like, legitimate noise canceling headphones. I don't know exactly what that snapping sound was. It's surprising that you could hear it.
Yeah.
But that was I don't have a great explanation for that. I'm not sure that was a ghost snapping.
No, you just probably heard something weird in the basement. The other thing that was interesting to me in the whole session was that you asked for something to scream. You asked for a screaming sound or whatever.
Yes.
And that's when a growl came through.
Now, you said this to me before, but I don't really hear this growl.
Or it's kind of just like somebody going, or something like that.
Well, here, let's take a listen to it.
And now I'd like you to please scream as loud as you can.
Ooh. I don't know.
And now I'd like you to please scream as loud as you can.
Ooh.
That. Somebody going, is something.
I heard you mean the.
Yeah, it's like a gravelly voice.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
For a second, I don't know.
I can't quite make out what that phrase is, but
yeah, something like that. It sounded like and I think, and that was my like ooh was like me being like, I think somebody said something there, but I can't repeat it because I don't know what it was.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would just be
frustrating.
saying some nonsense because I've listened to it probably more than a dozen times, and to me, it's still just.
Yeah, it's like nonsense.
If anyone can interpret what that sound is, slangmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, let us know because I can't figure that out. Mm-hmm. It seems like it's just one of the voices in the radio sweeps and whatever.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to say was that when the time moved very interestingly.
Okay. In
the session, like when I was all isolated and everything, like you would come and get me, and it would feel like only like 5 minutes had passed, and a lot of time had passed.
Yeah, we ran the first 2 sessions. We ran for I think 15 minutes, and the last session we ran for almost half an hour.
Mm-hmm. And it didn't feel like any time at all.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want to move to the second session then? Yeah. So that was the double blind session. That was to remove any possible biases that we could imagine. Mm-hmm. Then the second session, you and I were both in the room together. I was reading the predetermined questions that you had never seen before off a sheet of paper in order. You did not know which session we were doing.
No,
I didn't
no
tell
idea.
you that up front.
Right.
So this one, I was reading the questions and we were waiting to see if you responded. Now, there would be more of a bias on my part because I could wait and see if you were actually responding in time to me. So how was this one for you? Tell me about this.
This one felt better, meaning that it felt I could get into it quicker. I was more primed, I guess you would say.
Or more used to
I was more
the
accustomed to the experience.
Yeah, sure.
So I was jumping right in, no hesitation. And then it also felt more charged. It felt more, if I were to say, ghostly. Like it was just, I think because I was just kind of cruising and I was in it.
Right.
And there wasn't that awkwardness. So I felt more freaked out
Oh, interesting. Okay.
with the second one.
Do you think that influenced the responses that you gave?
Hell
Or
no.
did it influence your willingness to speak? Because you felt freaked out?
No, I mean, I spoke no matter what. I just regurgitated what I was hearing. So it
Okay.
doesn't really affect that. I think I was just more used to the sounds. Yeah, I was just more accustomed to it, I think.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. Well, yeah, so let's talk about some of the things that jumped out for this one. Yeah, I think it's interesting early on when I said to the camera that I was going to read the pre-recorded questions, you say list and then you say one, I believe, right?
Right, like you have a list of questions and then you're on question 1
Right.
or something like that. Yeah.
I'm going to be reading
List.
the pre-recorded questions.
1. Yeah, that was interesting. That was cool.
And that's followed almost immediately with testimonials and video,
Yeah.
which is, I guess, sort of what we were doing, right?
Yeah.
Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to us?
With video. Restrictions apply. You know what it is also about the second session was I was into it more, but also I feel like it was the most relevant.
Sure.
I feel
Yeah.
like the voices that came through
responses.
made more sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
the responses were good.
Well, that's like you heard the word Ouija board.
Wait, Ouija board. Wait, Ouija board. Which is interesting because that might not even be what they're saying.
That's not what they're. It
No.
sounds like it starts with a D,
Oh, okay.
but I
Digital.
don't know.
Maybe
specific-
it's digital or something.
It might be digital.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting because that does seem like that's influenced by the setting. Again,
Yep.
like we were talking about, when you sit down and you're like, okay, this is gonna be spiritual communication. Well, what's the perfect spiritual communication thing? Ouija board.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was definitely primed to think in that way.
Yeah.
I say ability. When you ask if I can move or if I'm stuck here. Ability. Ability.
You interpreted that as ability, and I think ability is there. But to me, that sounds like accountability.
I think so too. Now that I hear it again. And it's weird because the account part is quiet.
Right.
But ability gets loud. And so like, is that what was supposed to be portrayed? Ability.
is that the word that you were
Yeah.
supposed to grab?
Yeah, not like accountability. It was
Right.
like that. It was very interesting.
I think it's also important to point out, just for context here too, that we did this in August, and we did this, that a lot of Olympics news was happening at the time. So that would pop up.
lot of
Olympics and games and things were definitely around as we were doing these recordings.
Mm-hmm.
And this session was run at our house, which is just outside of Philadelphia. So we had a lot of radio, I don't know if you call it interference, but on the sweeps, there were a lot of radio stations that were coming through, and a lot of things like, you said you got what were clearly Apple and Verizon and ads and those sorts of things.
Verizon. Apple. Yes, a lot of sports stuff.
So let's keep running down this
Sounds good.
list that we have here.
Okay.
You have Did You Die Here indoors?
Did you die here?
Indoors.
Did you die here?
Indoors. What's really cool that I'm noticing now is that the voices get quiet and then they get loud.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of makes me realize, like, oh, I'm supposed to maybe be saying the loud stuff?
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
that's
I don't
what
know.
the ghosts want me to do? I don't know. So anyway, that was interesting. That was a cool response.
This is, I think, a classic case of that recontextualization here, because is that intelligent communication? Kind of, but the "did you die here" is actually a yes or no question.
Yep.
Like, if you ask someone that sort of question, did you go there or something like that, the response of just a straight indoors is a very uncommon response, as opposed to yes, I did indoors, or yes, I died indoors, or something like that. It's just this
Right.
little snippet. Now, I'm sure that a parapsychologist, a ghost hunter, would say that's all the ghost can manifest. You only get this small amount. But I think it's important because, it's not really a response if you were going to use the most economical language that you possibly could. And I said, did you die here? You would say yes or no, not indoors.
Yeah. There was a moment when you asked, what else do you want us to know about your life? And the answer I gave was everything passing.
What else do you want us to know about your life?
Everything passing.
What else do you want us to know about your life?
Everything passing. Yeah, so pretty sure the voice says everything classic.
I think it's classic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Sure.
take what you want from that.
Yeah. I thought that was and anytime I got something like that, something that was kind of smart and wise like that, I would just get this chill. I'd be like, ooh, that's
So
cool.
it creeped you out.
It creeped me out when I got something that was like that. Like really like, it just sounded so real,
Yeah.
But again, I'm pretty sure she's saying everything classic. And yeah.
So much of it is that setting.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, and we did this kind of deliberately too. I invited my partner, my good friend Stephen John, to help us out. We did the whole basement in like a very creepy manner. He blew some smoke into the basement. We made it creepy. We were actually referencing stills from Midnight Mass as we were setting up our lighting.
Cool.
But so we wanted to create this like darker, more sinister ambiance to it, which I'm sure was part of the influence that you had, and I'm certainly part of the influence that I had as we were communicating.
Definitely. And then, once in a while, Rick Astley would come along and say hello.
Yes, these were great. Here, this is our copyright-free snippets of Rick Astley.
Yeah.
It was really funny.
It was like, I was like, whoa, the first time it happened, I was like, okay. And then it happened again and again. I was like, oh man.
It's kind of, I do still maintain that if there's any proof that there is spiritual communication that happened that day, it's the fact that a ghost rickrolled you 3 separate times.
Yes. Repetitive evidence. We can repeat it.
So then for the third session, this was the more kind of standard session. This is how they do it in the ghost hunting shows, where I was not restricted to the preset list of questions. I was actually responding to what you were doing. And I have a background as a magician. And so I was trying to give that sort of seance style, which is to say that as I was doing this, I was actually trying to build a narrative. I was trying to make it as if, I was convincing the viewer that a ghost was coming through, that we were actually having spiritual communication. So despite that, early on, we got some ads, right, EJ?
Yeah, a lot of ads came through. I was a little creeped out. Mm-hmm. Once in a while, my heart would beat a little fast because I think I would just kind of get myself like worked up a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I like to try to have a very open mind, even though I don't this is no secret. I don't really buy into any of this.
Right.
But I try to have a really open mind because I want to be wrong. I say this all the time. I want this stuff to be real. So I can't imagine what it must be like for somebody who really believes in it, who is doing this. How intense that must be.
It's what you bring to it then,
Yeah.
right? Because if you bring this a surety that you are going to have an experience, you're going to have one.
Oh, for sure.
You know, whether it's real, quote unquote, real or not, it's real to you. It makes me think about the remote viewing that we've been talking about, where the remote viewing and the sessions of remote viewing that they were doing in the U.S. government in association with the Men Who Stare at Goats program and all of that stuff, the Stargate program, that was all primed before they even had the session by saying, I think you'd be really good at remote viewing. So the first thing that you do when you sit somebody down for this is, I feel like you're the best to communicate with the spirit. Do you want to try this experiment where we are going to talk to ghosts? And so the person comes into the space like that. It would actually be really cool one day if we could find someone who's not familiar with the Estes method to set them up like this, not tell them why, and do it and see what happens. So, let's talk about this third session though, because this is where we actually try to build our narrative. So one of the things that I did is that you spoke 56.
56.
56. 56.
1956.
Well, yeah.
1956. Okay. 1956.
Well, yeah.
1956. Okay.
So, and then you gave me a yeah or a well, yeah. And so I took that as a 1956, but it wasn't a 1956. You heard a 56.
Yes.
But again, I was using my training to try to build this narrative the way that I thought a medium would. So that year meant something there, right? Later, when we had a conversation with Stephen John about his own experience and his interpretations of it, he took that as his mother being 56. So there's differing opinions of how we process that. But you can see how if he wasn't there interpreting that as an age, I made that into a year, and then we ran with that 1956 for the rest of the session until he spoke up and said, oh, I think that's an age.
Right. It tells you something.
But it's shots in the dark. We're just taking
these
these words and figuring out what they mean after the fact.
And that's all that this is. This is just pattern recognition and building a narrative, like you said.
Right. So then we also have uncoupling and fun couples.
Was someone hurt in this house in 1956?
Uncoupling.
Fun couples.
Was someone hurt in this house in 1956?
Uncoupling.
Fun couples.
This couple,
Thanks.
are they here?
Way out.
This couple,
Thanks.
are they here?
Way out. Again, that's not what was said.
Right.
I misinterpreted it.
Right, but there you have me leading that again. I already got the 1956. I take it to, was somebody hurt in this house in 1956? And then you misinterpret uncoupling. I believe it's uncoupling as fun couples. And then boom, there's our narrative, right? So 1956, there were fun couples who were hurt in this house. We're building it together.
Yeah. A sex orgy gone wrong, I think.
That's what it
swinger
seems,
party.
That's literally what it seems like,
Yeah.
right? There were swingers in this house. Yeah, and then shortly after that, we had a advertisement for Dorney Park, which is an amusement park near us.
Right. Right.
This couple's not in the house, they're far away.
DorneyPark.com.
This couple's far away from the house.
There's also one where it's weird because I said August 11th, but I don't think I can hear it in the playback.
Well, let's listen.
Okay. August 11th. August 11th. Ooh, I do hear it. Yeah. It's quiet, but I hear it now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there. But again, just to be completely clear and transparent, we were running this on August 10th. Mm-hmm. So it's not that unbelievable that August 11th would have come through as a radio voice.
Definitely not.
That brings us to the very strange laugh that came through. That is really bizarre, and I don't exactly have a explanation for it. It's very creepy. Probably the most creepy thing we captured altogether.
Yeah, and it didn't even affect me. I don't even think I heard it.
I don't think you heard it either. It's one of those things we only heard after the fact. But yeah, here it is.
You're enough for the season? Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely hear that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a child's laugh. It's one of those creepy children laughs. And it's interesting because that's actually over top of the person saying enough for the season or whatever that is. So it seems like that's either layered in the ad or the radio broadcast or something like that, or it's some other kind of interference that came through. What's interesting, I think, is that you don't seem like you heard it in the session. So it's possible that it was some other interference that got recorded onto our recorder during the process.
That'd be creepy.
Yeah.
Ghostly, perhaps.
And then at the midpoint of this session, I talked to Stephen John, who had, unknown to you, put some of his mom's ashes in the space that we were recording in to use as kind of a trigger object. And you didn't know that that was there at all, so we knew that you would be blinded from any of that. And then he kind of interpreted what he could take from that, and I tried to address his mother directly. He was the one who took the 56 that you said initially, not as in 1956, but that being the age that his mother got cancer. When I asked if she had been there, a voice you reported as from start to finish.
Gingy, are you here with us?
From start to finish.
Gingy, are you here with us?
From start to finish.
There again, that voice, is she using the radio broadcast? Mediums, spiritualists would say yes, that she was coming through and she had been there from start to finish. I'm not sure I buy that.
Yeah, I don't know what to conclude. I mean, it's hard because we're talking about somebody that, is in our lives who went through something very hard, very, very difficult. And so I struggle to talk about this at all, actually. But I mean, we just have to look at the evidence at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it's hard to conclude. For me personally, it's hard to conclude anything.
I think that when you look at everything that we captured that was either nonsensical or misinterpreted, and then you look at the history of instrumental transcommunication and its basic inability to communicate with anything that has been proven time and time again, I see no reason to conclude that we captured any spirits that day.
This is my struggle here because I don't believe in any of it, and it would have needed to be absolutely airtight, perfect communication,
right,
and repeatable. Like we should have been able to repeat that every single session. And
the problem is that it's only ever coincidences.
Yes.
The good evidence that you get, like that, are you here from start to finish? That is only ever a coincidental moment. It's not a intelligent communication, no matter what the ghost hunters want you to believe.
It's just not repeatable, really.
And I mean, you're processing something through apophenia. You are looking for those words. We were looking for communication from her, And so we were able to find something. It doesn't mean that she was actually communicating. It just means that we were able to find something that told us that she was. And that's a big difference and a big gap.
It is a big gap. Not to mention, I had trigger objects from my family sitting out there, and
Nothing, and nothing from your family came through at all.
nothing. Nobody
Right.
from this house that I can, like, and not
Right.
that I don't know about the history of this house, but it's old. I mean,
Yes.
you.
And so the other interesting thing, and admittedly we don't have a recording of this, but we took the Spiritbox to your house in upstate New York, which is 150 years old?
Older.
Older than 150 years. Okay, so over 150 years old. And we ran that Spiritbox in the middle of nowhere where you live, basically. I mean, what's the closest town to you? You don't need to say the name of the town, just
The
say
closest small town is probably about, it's really probably like a 5 to 8 minute drive if you're going, but
it's a small
It's a
town.
small town, yes.
So we did not even get radio broadcasts on the Spiritbox. It was just nothing. And you know what is interesting is that we ran that thing for probably, I want to say 20 minutes, something like that. And we did not get any voices. And you would think that if that technology worked as well as it did, and as well as it did here, where you were very clearly, again, if we were going to say that this is all true, you got a lot of communication
I was
here.
bombarded with voices. It was
Right.
hard to keep up.
Right.
Yeah.
So then why were you not in the 150 plus year old farmhouse where multiple people had died,
Yeah,
right?
I know that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, multiple people have been confirmed to have died, where we know that it was an indigenous trade route. Why would there not be some manner of communication on a device that was so useful, so powerful, so prolific here? Yeah. Well, I think that has something to do with the fact that we're in the outskirts of Philly and we have a lot of radio broadcasts, and where you are, you don't.
And that was really eye-opening to me.
Yes.
When we played that and there was nothing.
My conclusion from all of this is that the Estes method does not seem to bring any more use or any more veracity to the Spiritbox. The Spiritbox, which is already a device that is based on a flawed logic and a flawed history. Remember, Frank's box. Remember the O'Neill experiment with his electrolarynx, and all of that. This has a long history of being apophenia, of being people searching for noise in data and literal noise. And I don't believe that the Estes method solves any of the inherent problems that the Spiritbox has.
I think the Estes method is fancy packaging to an old system. It's really neat, fun idea to isolate yourself and listen to radio broadcasts. It's like when I first saw it in Hellier, I was like, cool.
Oh, it was so creepy too.
So
and
cool.
they ran like a half-hour session live too.
It was long.
Fucking awesome.
It was great.
Yeah.
But that's how I see it. It's just fancy packaging.
Right.
It's really fun. Our friend wants to do it with us.
Oh, yeah.
For fun, which we'll totally do. But yeah, that's kind of my conclusion. It's a lot of fun, and it's pretty inconclusive to me. So
Yeah, I think that you bring up a really good point there. I mean, that's what all of this is, right? Instrumental transcommunication is just the newest, shiniest, latest packaging of what the Fox sisters were doing, what the spiritual mediums were doing in the 1850s. It's all the same kind of, let's sit down in the dark and let's scare each other.
yeah,
It's just, let's use the technology. As things evolve, we find new and shinier and fancier ways to do exactly what we have been doing for the last 150 years, which is all sit together, hold hands, and pretend that we see ghosts.
yep,
Which is also, I must say, the perfect thing to do for Halloween.
yeah. So have fun,
Yeah,
knock yourself out,
absolutely.
watch a horror movie.
Absolutely.
Tonight we're gonna watch Oddity, which I'm very excited
Yes,
about.
tonight is Oddity, which should be awesome.
Yeah.
Highly, if you need some good recommendations, Late Night with the Devil is fucking fantastic. Can't recommend it highly enough. If you want to check out the full versions of these sessions that we have run, head over to slayingmonsterspodcast.com, click on the support us button at the top of the page. That'll take you to our Buy Me a Coffee site. If you become a subscriber there, you will get access to all of the videos, the whole playlist of them, including our introduction and an overview of the gear that we're using for it. If you don't want to become a full-time supporter, you just want to get the sessions themselves, there's an option to buy them as a one-off purchase as well. All of your support, as always, buys us books and keeps us on the airwaves, keeps us doing something that I really, really enjoy. This has been a whole lot of fun. So hopefully we will be bringing you more of these investigations in the future, because I think this is just awesome. And I love that EJ, you and I can attack these as, you know, critically minded people, but also people that love this. Because I think too often the skeptics who do this are looking for reasons to debunk it. And I just was looking for a reason to do it.
And I want to believe it. I want to believe
sure.
it so bad. So
For sure.
My idea is to never fully debunk. It's to find it.
If we can do it, man, like how cool would it be if we were the ones that found a ghost?
Yeah, see? Everybody always wants to be that person. And that's why it's so addicting.
Yep.
Yes.
So
Anyway.
Absolutely. So yeah, thank you so much for supporting us on this journey. It's been so much fun. We are gonna keep doing what we're doing. We got a bunch more content coming your way. We have more Oak Island, and then we're gonna stick with some spooky stuff after that. So stick around. It's gonna be awesome. Thank you all so much for listening. And let's see. It's Halloween, baby, right? Like it's Halloween. It is the creepiest of creepy times, right?
Yeah. Happy Halloween, everybody. Thank you so much.
I found this really awesome quote by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle that I think is just the perfect embodiment, not only of this season, but also of this episode and just all of this ghost communication and everything that we do here. Where there is no imagination, there is no horror.
That's it.
That's it.
That's very brief.
Where there is no imagination, there is no horror. So, this Halloween, let your imagination run wild.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Be safe out there. Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters, the Paranormal History Podcast. If you like the podcast, there's a couple ways to show your support. You can tell your friends, you can leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform, or you can head over to slayingmonsterspodcast.com and click on the Support Us button to leave a donation. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on Instagram @slayingmonsterspodcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.